So you just bought the new Sony a7s III camera and you're super excited to get it. You dive into the menu settings to start setting everything up and you are overwhelmed or you just don't know where to start. Well, this video is for you. Hey, I'm Luke with Wedding Film Coach. Thanks so much for stopping by the channel. In this video, we're going to dive into the new Sony a7s III brand new menu system, and we're going to walk through each menu system, each menu step by step, let you know what it's for, how you can adjust things in there to make sure your camera is set up for your needs. So we're going to go ahead and dive in head first. Real quick before we get started, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications. It would mean the world to me. Also, if you like this content, I'm making a whole guide for this camera. Go to freecameraguide.com and sign up for the free camera guide. It's going to have this and a lot more content in there, but make sure you stay tuned to that. So first of all, I want to say you can actually go on your mobile phone or on your desktop to Sony's website. I'll put a link in the description, but you can go to the online manual where you can, anything you see in here, you can do a Command F or a Control F on that online manual and search for anything you see in this menu. And that's really going to help you out so you don't have to wonder exactly what something means. They also have a new help guide. They've been doing this for some of their newer cameras, and it's a little bit more of an interactive kind of lead you through how to figure out the camera. And so if you're not someone who really likes to figure things out by yourself, then I would recommend that as a great resource as well. Okay, enough talk. Let's get into the menu. First menu you actually come to, let me come back here, is the My menu. This is simply where you can customize your own menu. So it's not just going to be what your shooting modes are or your autofocusing system. You can put everything in there together, from your Wi-Fi settings to your setup, to your playback. Anything you want to, you can customize this menu. So that's really awesome. I'll probably make another video in the future giving you what I would suggest putting in your menu system for video, specifically if you are a wedding videographer or wedding filmmaker, however you refer to yourself. I'll give you some tips that will really help save you time and make your camera much better fit for your needs. So let's go ahead and go down into the shooting menu. And another quick tip here, anytime you're on a menu, you can hold your finger or your thumb, whatever you're using to touch your touch menu interface. You can hold down your finger over that option and it'll pop up a little window that will tell you what that menu is. So that's nice as well. So number one, shooting menu, and number one under there is image quality. Let's go ahead and go into that. We have file format is the first thing. So this is essentially your resolution for your movie settings. Let's go through these step by step. I'll try to just briefly explain what these are so you have a better context for what you're getting into. So the XAVC HS 4K, it's 4K resolution obviously, but that HS means that it is the H.265 codec, which is a higher compressed codec, which means that it's going to get more data and more information in a smaller file size, which would be nice for data and storage, but most of the time your computer is not going to like these quite as much as the typical H.264 codec that is in that most MP4s and .movs use. And so I would recommend actually staying away from this for right now, unless you have a really beefy computer and you are fully familiar and aware with H.265 and you already use those, then don't pay attention to me. But if you're not familiar with that stuff or you don't already use them, stay away from this codec for now until computers get a little bit better at handling those. For now, I would honestly recommend going into the second setting. That's XAVCS 4K. This is a typical 4K setting found in most cameras, and this is still going to give you a lot of great options. We'll go into the frame rate and data rate here in just a second, but finishing up here, we also have HD. This is going to be 1080 full HD. We have a lot of different options there as well. The next one is XAVCS-I 4K. This is your all eye setting, your all interlace setting, essentially meaning that every single frame is processed in this setting. And so I would recommend this if you're doing any kind of green screen work or chroma key work, Or if you shoot a lot of sports and you need a really high quality image, such as racetrack stuff or football or basketball or anything like that, you may choose to do this. But honestly, the first 4K or that second 4K setting I mentioned is probably going to fit just fine for you. And last, kind of the same thing here, the eye, it's the all eye, that's your HD option for that. Let's stick with XAVC-S 4K for right now. Let's go down into movie settings, and here we have our frame rate. Let's go into that, see what our options are. We have 60, 30, 24, and 120. I can change between either of these. One thing to note, if you don't already have a V90 speed SD card, you may get an error message right here, and that's okay. Pay attention to that, because that's going to let you know if your SD card can actually handle what you're telling your camera you want to record. So make sure you pay attention to those warning messages. And then next we have our record setting. This is going to be your bit rate or your data rate. This is going to be essentially the quality of footage you're getting. So I can still choose between a 420 8-bit or a 422 10-bit at a little bit higher data rate of 280 megabits per second. I would recommend, if you went through the hassle and the time and money to get this camera, go ahead and shoot in 10-bit. Go ahead, challenge yourself, get those better files, challenge yourself to work with it in color grading and post, and I think you'll be happy that you did. I'm going to go ahead and change this back to 60 for right now. Let's come down to S&Q settings. Since I'm in my 4K setting, we have our options for this. Your record frame rate essentially means what you want your produced video to end up as. So I want my produced video that this is going to make for me in S&Q setting at 24 frames per second. I want it to start out shooting in 120 frames per second. So that's going to be my frame rate, and it's going to slow it down for me to 24 frames per second, that first option. Still, I have my record setting option in here. I can still choose between 8-bit or 10-bit, 422 or 420. I want to stay in 422 10-bit. It's gonna film at 120 frames per second, and then it's gonna actually produce in camera. Don't have to do any post editing to it. It's gonna produce in camera a 24 frames per second slow motion movie for me. It's not gonna have any sound to it, so make sure to pay special note of that, so you don't come out expecting to have audio and video. It's just going to be video. I want to come back out for a second and come back up to file format and choose HD. So this is 1080 resolution, and come back into S&Q settings. Now, I still want to record. My record frame rate is 24 frames per second. I want to come down to my frame rate, what I want to shoot in. Now I have the option to shoot in 240 frames per second. And I have some different record settings there as well. And so if you find that something isn't available to you that you thought was going to be there, it may be connected to some other setting. They don't do a great job of explaining this, but just kind of hunt around for all those different settings to mash up, and I think you'll be happy. I'm going to go ahead and go back to just a 4K for right now, and want to be in 60 frames per second. We went through our S&Q. Now, proxy settings. I'm going to highly recommend that you consider using proxy settings for at least one project. Try out that workflow and see what you think. Mostly because I have a nice computer, but even my computer has been struggling with these 10-bit files, especially the H.265 files that I tried out. And it's just, you have to have a really beefy computer to be able to handle these. So proxy settings are going to enable you to simultaneously create an identical in content video that is much more stripped down as far as data rate and quality. That way you can put it into your computer and say, okay, I want to edit this, and it's going to edit much smoother. It's going to play back much smoother. And then when you actually go to render out a file or export, it's going to pull all the good information from your original bigger file with it. So if that didn't make sense, there's probably tons of videos on proxies that explain it better than me. But essentially, I'm going to encourage you to turn this on if you can. Leave your file format at XAVC-S HD. It's going to create a very small 720 standard HD file that's going to be super easy for your computer to handle, to play back, to edit. You'll be happy that you did that. Coming back, if we chose, let me go back up into file format again. You see how some of these options are connected. Go to File Format, go back to HD. Now our APS-C S35 Super 35 shooting mode is available. I can turn this on, and this is simply going to crop in my image by about 1.5 times. As lens compensation, this is essentially just in-camera compensation for your lens. Most people just save this kind of stuff for post-production. That way they're not baking anything into their image that they don't want there. Come back out. Let's go ahead and move into media. This is where we would format our media cards. If you need to do that in camera, which I recommend, always make sure that you back up your footage and then back it up a second time on a second hard drive. Be paranoid about that. You'll be glad that you did. Record media settings. This is simply where you can choose between, I want to prioritize everything going into slot 1 or slot 2. You can record just standard, meaning just record to one slot at a time, or you can record simultaneously movies to both or pictures to both. Lots of photographers will do this. Video, not quite as often. You can. I like to save, because I'm shooting so much and these files are so hefty, I like to save my SD card to be kind of overflowed, my second SD card to be overflowed. So I leave it in standard, but if you like to have an on-camera backup, go ahead and move that to simultaneously. That's where you do that. Auto switch media is what I was referring to earlier. If my slot 1 SD card fills up, then it's automatically going to start writing that file to slot 2, and it's not going to stop my recording, which is great in case it's on my camera's on a tripod and I'm not attending to it at the moment. It's going to keep recording, which is what we want. All right, moving along. We're doing good, guys. Recover image database. Pull up my help icon here. This says it recovers the image database file for movies and enables recording and playback. So if you're having trouble, you may try that. Display media info. This is simply going to tell you how much time you have left recording onto your camera given the settings that you've chosen. Coming back out. File settings. This is where you can really start to customize how your files look in post. And so I leave mine as a series, or you can reset. This essentially means that every time that you format a card, do you want it to go back down to, hey, this is file C0001, or do you want it to continue to build up and say, I shot 100 files yesterday, so the first file I shoot today is going to be file 101. I like it in a series, and that way it helps me keep track of what I'm doing a little bit easier. You can reset that series here if you need to in series counter reset. File name format, standard, or you can do title or date and title, a few different options there. Title name settings, you can choose to make this whatever you want. So if you're shooting the Adams wedding, you can put in Adams here and it'll say Adams 0001 for your first file, or the Barnes wedding or the Baker wedding or whatever. You can customize that, which is really neat if you need to do that. Okay, coming back out, moving along. Number 4, shooting mode. We go into exposure mode. I'm going to highly recommend that you keep this in M, exposure mode manual. Manual exposure. This is going to allow you to make sure that you have full control over your camera. And if you got a camera like this, then you want to have full control over it. Trust me. Exposure type, you don't want it to be flexible. Let's see what that means. Sets the movie mode to flexible exposure mode. Shoots movies by adjusting aperture and shutter speed manually. You can individually switch from manual to automatic adjustment for each function. You just want to shoot in manual mode. I wouldn't even bother with that. Here is where you can start to set up your presets. So on your mode dial, you have modes, custom modes 1, 2, and 3. Here is where you can come in and in your settings, you can choose to, hey, I want to shoot in 4K. I want my shutter speed to be 1/50. I want my aperture to be 4.0. I want my ISO to be 3200. And then you can come in here and say camera set memory. I want to remember exactly those settings, my white balance, my shutter speed, all my exposure stuff, my autofocus settings. I want to remember all of those settings. I want to bake them in to preset number 1, and I would hit enter here, and it's going to do that for me. I can come back out and choose 4K 60, manual focus. I can go into number 3 and say, hey, I want to shoot in 120 frames per second here in a daylight white balance. You can customize all those things, come in here, bake them into one of those presets, and then at the flick of your mode dial, you can switch between 24 frames per second to super slow-mo at 120 to all kinds of stuff just at the flick of a button, and you don't even have to go into your menu settings. And I'll probably come out with another video about that later, what I would suggest setting up for those custom menus. But this is a really, really great function. Let's come back out and keep going. And this is where you could save those to an SD card slot if you wanted to. Sorry. Number 5, shutter silent. Okay, so your silent mode settings. This is if you were shooting with photography and you wanted your silent shutter to be active. You can choose to have it either disable or enable. Release without lens, not really applicable to video, but so we'll keep going. Audio recording, you definitely want to have your audio recording on. Here's where you can set your audio recording levels. Audio out timing, live or lip sync. This is mostly a monitoring issue. So if you're not familiar with those, you're probably not monitoring audio. No worries there. Wind noise reduction. If you're out in an outdoor setting and you don't have a controlled audio environment, I might recommend trying this and see if it works better for you. I would have it turned off for most of the other time though, just so it doesn't change your audio quality that you don't want it to. This shoe audio set, this is invalid since no audio device is attached to the multi-interface shoe. Audio level display, yes, you want this on. You definitely want to have this on. That way, if your audio isn't coming through, your microphone's off, you didn't check something, this is going to let you know. All right, coming back out. This is your timecode menu. I know pretty much nothing about timecode and all that stuff, so I'm not going to pretend I do, but if you need this, this is where it is. All right. Coming back out. Number 8, image stabilization. This is where you choose your steady shot between standard, active, and off. I would start out with standard, and if you need a little bit more stabilization, try active. Honestly, both of these modes are really great. There's not much warble or any kind of crazy thing like that. It works really well. In active, there is a 1.1 crop, a 10 times crop, but honestly, that's not bad. It's pretty good for what you're getting. You can also choose it to have your steady shot adjust automatically, meaning if you have a Sony lens or an electronic lens, it's going to talk to your camera and say, hey, I'm a 50 millimeter lens or I'm a 24 millimeter lens, and so it knows exactly how to stabilize that for you, because that makes a big difference. Also, you may have heard that if you turn this off and you turn off the stabilization in your lens, that you have access to in-body metadata that's going to tell software how to stabilize it in post. And I was really excited about this before the camera came out. I tried it once or twice with the Catalyst Browse software. I would highly recommend not trusting this software just yet for the Sony a7s III. It's very slow, one, and it's not as dependable as it needs to be to kind of hinge a project or a scene on just yet. Use the in-body image stabilization for now, and then as that software becomes a little bit better, a little bit more dependable, becomes quicker, then I'll be sure to update everybody on that as well. For now, I want to leave this at standard and come back out here. Zoom, this is where you can set the type of zoom you want to do. Go ahead and put your zoom range. You want to choose clear image zoom. This is Sony's special. It says uses clear image zoom. That's really helpful, obviously. But this is Sony's special kind of zoom where it's going to maintain quality much better than if you were just doing a normal zoom. So go ahead and put clear image zoom there. And then I would set up, and I'll show you how to do this in another video, but I would set up a custom button, maybe C2 or C1 on the back as your zoom button. And then that way you can use that to zoom in and out if you need a little bit extra reach in one of your shooting modes. And let's come back out for now. You can see you can even change the zoom speed if you need to. I would suggest probably bumping that up to a 4 or a 5. Some of those, because I was trying that earlier this last week and it just seemed a little slow. So let's come back out. Shooting display. This is going to give you grids. This is going to give you whether you rule of thirds or square grid, diagonal plus square. So you have lots of customization options here. You can have this means emphasize display during recording. So this is the difference between just having like a little blinking light in the corner of your screen versus having a red rectangle around your screen letting you know that you're recording. So I would highly recommend turning this on. I honestly don't think it's going to be a distraction to you. Try it out. It's going to make it much more obvious when you're recording and when you're not, which is always helpful because we've all been in that situation where we thought we were recording, we thought we were getting a shot, and then we look down and it says stand by in green, and you just want to throw up. Okay, so that'll help you there. Let's come back out here. I'm actually going to turn these off because I don't use those. Marker display, this is where you can choose, I want my marker display on, I want what kind of marker on. Lots of people use aspect markers for these, and you come in and you see you have 4:3, 13 by 9, 14 by 9, 1.66, 1.85, 2 through 5. The most standard as far as cinema, making your film look more cinematic, lots of people use that 2.35 to 1 or 1.85 to 1, but definitely try that out on your own. See what works best for you all. Okay, and we come back out here. So that's it for the shooting menu. We got through it. Let's go ahead and move down to our exposure. So this is where we get into our exposure. We'll go to number 1, exposure, auto slow shutter. We don't want anything auto on our camera if you're doing video, so just go ahead and set that to off. And let me see if I can pull up exactly what this means. So this sets the function that automatically adjusts the shutter speed following the brightness of the environment. Again, we don't want any kind of auto, so keep that off. Here's your ISO range. This is where you can just set your ISO. You can limit the range. If you, in your testing, find that a certain range is better or worse for you, you can go ahead and set this here so that even when you're setting it with your quick function menu, that you can't go above or below a certain amount. And so some people that might be helpful too. Okay, and then what is this here? Automatically manual method of exposure. I don't know what that is. All right, you can look that up in the help menu. All right, exposure compensation. Exposure compensation really doesn't affect video, so I'm just going to skip past that. But if you're a photographer and you got this camera, you can check that out there. Metering. Metering mode, I do use this. I like to use spot metering mode because that means that I know exactly where I'm putting that spot and I know exactly what I want it to be metering. That way I don't have to guess whether if the scene's too bright, well, is my subject still exposed correctly? I enjoy spot. And also put face priority in multi. I went ahead and put that on in case I ever do go into multi metering, that it's always going to focus on my faces, which is what I want. And spot metering point, I want this to be on the focus point length. This essentially means that if you have, like say, a medium spot focus, and you're touching your touch screen to say, okay, I want it to focus here, that is where your metering is going to be metering from as well. And so if you put your focus spot on a face or your subject, it's going to go ahead and meter that spot for you as well, which I really enjoy. Okay, coming out. White balance, this is where you can set your white balance. Shockless white balance. This is a new setting. It simply means that this is going to allow it to transition your white balances a little bit easier. And so if for some reason you're in the middle of a shot and you see, oh my gosh, I have the wrong white balance, you can go ahead and shift that white balance, change your settings, and it's not going to be this kind of jump and this cut and it's not going to be this jump or this cut like it normally would be, but it's going to gradually change that white balance, much like an auto ISO kind of thing, where it's not going to be as noticeable or as abrupt of a change. And so I went ahead and put mine on 2. I don't want it to be too fast. I don't want it to be too slow. I think I like this setting. Play around with it yourself and see what you like. Okay, come back here, go down to color and tone. We're almost through this. Here we have D-Range Optimizer. It's not available because I have a picture profile on right now. If you have your picture profile off, then this is going to just help you optimize your dynamic range, which if you are interested in dynamic range and that's something that's important to you, then you probably need to be shooting with a picture profile, most likely an S-Log. But if for some reason you want to leave your picture profile off, this dynamic range optimizer is available to you. Some people have said it's better to leave it off, that you can do the same thing in post much better and much more meticulously. And so just whatever you think's best for you, go for it. You can change your creative look as well. Again, if you have your picture profile off, and here's where you can change your actual picture profiles. Again, I'll probably make another video suggesting where to put this on a quick button or a function menu. That way you can get into this menu a little bit easier. Okay. Zebra display, this is where you change your zebra displays from on to off and put their level. Come back out here. And that is it for exposure. Hey, we're moving, guys. We're moving fast. We're going to get through this, okay? So for our autofocus mode, let's come into AF/MF focus mode. I have mine set to continuous AF. If you are doing video, this is what you want it to be set to, continuous AF, not MF. That's manual. You can also set your autofocus transition speed. Again, this is where you can really start to customize everything. I've left mine at 4 for right now. I think I'm pretty happy with that. I may change it to be a little bit quicker. Here, maybe next week I'm going to do some more testing with it. And this is your subject shift sensitivity, essentially meaning if you're focused on me right now and somebody walks in front of the camera, how long do they have to linger there in front of the camera before that focus shifts to them? Or is it going to wait and see if it can maintain my focus back when that other subject that's passing through has gone away? And so how sensitive do you want the shift to be? I wouldn't make this super responsive, or else you're going to get your autofocusing jumping all over the place. You also don't want to leave it locked on, or else it's never going to change whenever you need it to. So a 3, maybe a 2, maybe a 4 is going to be about right for you. Let's come back, focus area. I have personally been having great results with wide. I've never shot with wide before just because the face detection and the cameras I've used have not been great. I am blown away by how accurate and how easy it is to use this wide autofocusing area with wide with face detect and eye detect on. So I would try it with that first, just see how you like it. If you don't, I also usually recommend doing a spot focus, and you can choose between a medium or a large or a small spot. But honestly, I really enjoy wide. Kind of see behind the scenes there. Focus area limit. Here is where you can choose. I never use this setting. Go ahead, take this off. I never use zones. I'm going to take that off. Rarely use center, but I'm going to keep it on there. Expandable swap. So I think that's the only thing I'm going to take off for now. The focus area color. Just essentially what you want that reticule to be. Do you want it to be white or red? I would say white. Red may be a bit too distracting for you. Okay, this is circulating a focus point. It's weird how it's put in here in the menu. Probably a weird lost in translation kind of thing. But essentially this means if you have your focusing set on a spot focus and you're moving it around with your joystick on the back of the camera, if you move it all the way to the right and then you keep going right, it's going to kind of wrap around and come back to the left and keep going right. If you have this turned off, it's going to stop there at the edge of the right. It's not going to go anywhere else, or it's going to stop at the edge of the left. And so this could get a little confusing if you're not used to it, but it might also make it quicker to change that focus from side to side if you're using that joystick. So again, try it out, see what works best for you. And then the autofocus frame movement amount. Okay, so this is your autofocus frame movement amount. This is mainly going to be best to use during your expandable spot. So essentially, how much margin does it have for your subject to move out of that spot before it moves on to something else. Moving down, face and eye autofocus. Here we have face eye priority in autofocus. I have that set on. We can have it choose a human subject or an animal subject. I would leave it on human most of the time. It's still going to pick up animals pretty well, but if you choose animals, it may not pick up humans very well. But usually that's kind of something you know you're going to be shooting for. If you're at a zoo or you're doing outdoors, go ahead and switch it to animals, and I think you'll be fine. Here you can actually choose whether you want to prioritize the right eye or the left eye, which is awesome. I would say that would be a very specific kind of production that you would want to select that, whether or not you wanted the left eye or the right eye. But I just have mine on auto. As long as it grabs an eye, I'm fine with it. Here we go, face eye frame display. I do want it to let me know when it's locked on to an eye. It's going to display that for me, so I'm going to leave that on. If you don't want those boxes popping up on your screen, it's distracting, go ahead and turn that off. But for me, I would be afraid that I wouldn't know whether or not it was on or not, so I'll leave it on. Here's where you can actually register faces priorities. So again, if you're on a shoot and you want to register priority faces, prioritize one over another, this is where you would do that. Your focus assistant, this is going to be your focus magnifier. This is where you can punch in to check your manual focus and make sure everything looks good and crisp. Focus magnifier time. This is essentially like, do you want it to automatically go off after 2 seconds or 5 seconds, or no limit whenever you tell it to go off again. Here is where your initial focus magnifier, I would go ahead and just set it to ×4. It really doesn't do much good if it's ×1. And so just go ahead and switch it to ×4, and that way you're going to be able to punch in really quickly, check your focus, punch out, move on with your shoot. Okay, last one here in the focusing menu. This is for your peaking. Peaking display is on whenever I'm in manual focus. I want my peaking to be on, and I want my peaking level to be about mid. I don't want it to be too heavy. That can be distracting. Too light, sometimes I honestly don't see it. And I like my peaking color to be red. This means that it's usually a color that is not in the scene, and so I can distinguish it pretty easily. So that, as opposed to yellow, blue, or white, which are more likely to be in a scene. So, all right, hey, we're done with our shooting, our exposure, our autofocus. That is honestly most of what you're dealing with. So, hey, you're ahead of the game right now. Go into our playback menu. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but essentially anything to do with playing movies back or playing photos back on your camera, this is where you'll do it. I'm going to move on. Here's where you have your network and your connectivity options, from control it with a smartphone to Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, LAN, network options. This is where you'll have all that. This is more of kind of a deep dive, personal touch. I don't use it mostly unless I'm like connecting with my phone to use it as a monitor or something like that, which I don't have to do quite as much because we have the flip screen now. Yay! But this is where you would come into all that. I'm not going to go into detail here. Check it out for yourself. That's where it will be. Last menu, the setup menu. Here, of course, you have your area date. Once you turn your camera on for the very first time, it will automatically prompt you to change these settings, so you shouldn't have to go back into those. You can reset or save settings here. Operation customization. This is where you'll really start to customize your camera and make it yours, make it comfortable for you and your workflow and your settings. And so this is where you can come in and change. Now pay attention here. This is where you have custom key settings for photo. It has a little box there with like the little mountains on it. That's for photo. And so if you're doing just video, you don't even want to mess with that. Come back into the movie strip, custom key settings, and this is where you can start changing. And I love how they did this here. They actually have pictures of the camera and each button in its correlated position. So you don't have to say, okay, now wait, is that C1 or is that C2? It shows you right here on the picture, which is awesome. And you can, again, I'll come back in and do a deep dive into these settings at a different rate, but this is where, in a different video, but this is where you can change those. Very, very, very helpful. Same thing with your function menu settings. This is where you can come in and change those, whether it's your photo mode or your video mode. And we have different settings for stills and movies. Yeah. Okay. This is where you change that, going from stills to movies. I'm all movies, so I don't even want to mess with that. Display screen setup or monitor finder. This is where you kind of tell it all that you want it to have, the different options you want to have available as you're cycling through your monitor options. And record with shutter. If you want to be able to hit the shutter button and record, you can do that. I'm leaving mine off for now because I rarely do that, and I wouldn't want to try to be getting focused with something and accidentally stop recording or start recording. Dial customization. This is where you can dial in. This is where you can customize what you want your front dial to do, your back dial to do, your back control wheel, all that stuff. Again, I'll come back in another video and tell you how I customize mine. Touch operation. This is where you come in to make sure your touch operation is on, because you definitely want that. And also how sensitive it is. I just did a video about screen protectors. If you have a screen protector on your LCD screen, you may want to change this to sensitive if it's not picking your fingers up, if not picking your touch up quite as easily. But I'm going to leave mine in standard. That way I won't accidentally change things that I don't mean to. And it still works pretty good with the specific screen protector that I got on here. And this is whether you want it to be a touch panel or touch pad. I want to leave mine on panel because I'm always looking at that LCD. And then you can, if you want it to be pad, you can come in here and customize those settings as well. For Finder monitor, there we go. So I have So a lot of these options right now are invalid for me because I'm recording to an HDMI output. But usually you would be able to select between I want to see everything in my Finder, my viewfinder, or my monitor, the back screen of the panel. And you can go, you can look through here. It's going to be pretty simple. You can customize the color of it and everything. Display quality. This is where you can, if you're having trouble seeing the crispness of it, or it's not quite as sharp as it needs to be for you and your needs, you can change it to high. It's going to drain your battery a little bit more. And so I would encourage you to keep it on standard if you can. That way you're not going to drain your battery more than you have to. You can change your Finder frame rate here from high to, let's see if it tells us, it doesn't tell us the actual frame rate. But I would say standard is going to be best for most people. Again, preserving battery life there. Again, timecode stuff. Gamma display assist. This will be helpful if you're shooting a lot in S-Log. But I don't find that I need to just yet. But that may be something I play around with later. But that option's there if you need it. Also, gamma display assist type auto. We have S-Log, Rec 709, HLG, which is really cool. Remain shooting display. Let's see. That's just for movies, or excuse me, that's just for photos. Auto review, you definitely want that off. Okay, power setting option. This is where you can set your auto off options. So if I have my camera on and I'm not taking any movies and I'm not changing settings, I'm not doing anything with it, it's automatically going to shut off and preserve my battery life every 2 minutes. Or 2 minutes until I wake it up again. You can change this to up to 10 seconds. That's a little short for my taste. A minute may be better if you're running really low on battery life. I would not recommend setting this to 5 or 30. It's going to really drain your battery life and not be any use to you at that point. So let's and then your auto power off temp. This is a very, very important setting to change. Go ahead and select this, change it from standard down to high, and it's going to give you this warning message. It's not really a warning message, just letting you know the temperature of the device may rise. To prioritize recording time, would you like to change the setting? Hit OK. Absolutely. Sony's gone on the record that this will not harm or damage your sensor at all. Even if it heats up, it's going to be fine, but you definitely do not want your camera shutting off if it gets hot past that point where it triggers that mechanism. All right, coming out, we're almost done, guys. Sound options. This is your volume setting whenever you want to watch movies on your camera, which I wouldn't recommend unless you're just kind of reviewing things, but this is where you would do that. You do want to go ahead and put your audio signals off. This is going to take away any beeps whenever you're changing settings or focusing or anything like that. Set that off because you do not want to be a distraction while you are filming. USB, here's where you kind of go into all of your connections here. I'm going to leave mine USB connection auto, multi. You do want your USB power supply option on. That way, as you're making movies, and if you can plug it in, then you are going to be powering that up by USB. Okay, here is where you have all your HDMI resolution options, and here's where you go in and change the auto. Here's mainly where the video settings are. Right now, I'm recording media during HDMI output. That's going to let me record media in my camera even while I'm recording to my Ninja. So that's great. You can change your output resolution. You can change to RAW. You can change your timecode. All kinds of different things there. Again, I may dive into that a little bit deeper in another video. And last one, setup option, video light mode, power link, all stuff I never really use. This stuff is all stuff you don't really want to use. If you want to know what version you're working with, go to this. It's going to tell you what version, if you need to update, anything like that. Hey, whoo, we got through the menu setting. I'm looking at my battery life right now. It has the battery with like a cross on it, so I'm afraid it's about to die. I'm going to wrap this up real quick. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful to at least get some context around the menu setting. Let me know if you have questions in the comments below. Go to freecameraguide.com. Download, or whenever that camera guide's ready, you will be the first to get access. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next video.